Pine Hollow, Missouri, 1889. Lily Hayes stood frozen on the general store porch as 3 men on horseback blocked her path, their eyes cold as January creek water. And the eldest one pointed a gloved finger straight at her face and said she matched the description of Clara Voss, known accomplice to the Crowley gang. The wind picked up suddenly, carrying the smell of distant rain and something sharper, the metallic taste of fear. Lily had come to Pine Hollow 3 months ago with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a fierce determination to claim the 40 acres her uncle left her. And now, these men wanted to drag her back to Kansas to answer for crimes committed by a woman who merely shared her build and coloring. The store owner behind her stepped back inside and shut the door with a decisive click. No help there. Daniel Blackwood moved up beside her on the porch, his presence solid and calm despite the tension crackling through the air like heat lightning.
Ma'am has been working her homestead since April.
His voice carried that measured patience of a man used to managing fractious cattle and nervous horses.
You boys got the wrong person.
The lead rider, a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, leaned forward in his saddle. The rider said Crowley himself sent word that Clara Voss was hiding in Pine Hollow and matched her description exactly, and they had orders to bring her in. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly.
Then, Crowley's mistaken. This is Lily Hayes. She owns the old Barton place out past Copper Creek.
Lily felt her throat close. She had never heard of Clara Voss until 30 seconds ago. But the iron certainty in the rider's eyes told her that explanations would not matter. The second rider produced a folded paper from his coat and shook it open. Even from the porch, Lily could see the crude sketch. A woman's face with features close enough to her own to make her stomach lurch. The wind gusted harder, pulling at her shawl and sending dust skittering across the street. The scarred man jerked his chin toward Lily. He said they would take her in for questioning, and if she was innocent, she had nothing to fear.
I have never been to Kansas. I have never met anyone named Crowley. I have been working my land since spring, and half this town can vouch for that.
The third rider, younger with a nervous twitch in his cheek, glanced at the darkening sky. He muttered that a storm was coming, and they should settle this inside somewhere. The scarred man ignored him. He said they had their orders and dismounted with a jingle of spurs. Daniel stepped in front of Lily, his movements smooth and unhurried.
You are not taking her anywhere.
The scarred man's hand drifted toward his hip. The street around them had emptied, as if the townsfolk had evaporated into the wooden walls. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. She had spent 3 months fighting Missouri clay and summer heat to prove she could manage alone. And now, she was about to be dragged off for a crime she knew nothing about. Or worse, become the center of a shootout on Main Street. The wind roared suddenly, a wall of sound that made the horses sidestep and toss their heads. Dust rose in a choking cloud, turning noon into twilight. The storm hit Pine Hollow like a living thing. Within seconds, visibility dropped to arm's length. Lily felt Daniel's hand close around her wrist, firm and steady.
Inside. Now.
He pulled her toward the door of the general store, but it was locked. The scarred man shouted something lost in the wind's howl. Lily stumbled on the porch steps, blinded by dust, her eyes streaming. Daniel's arm came around her shoulders, sheltering her against his chest as he guided her along the building fronts. The world had become a roaring brown chaos. She could hear the riders' horses panicking, hooves clattering on wood and dirt, men cursing, Her boot caught on something, and she would have fallen if Daniel had not held her upright. His mouth was close to her ear.
Boarding house. 2 buildings down.
They staggered forward, leaning into the gale. Lily's lungs burned with every breath, dust coating her throat. Something large, maybe a sign or a loose shutter, crashed nearby. The wind screamed. Then Daniel was pushing open a door and hauling her through it into sudden relative quiet. They collapsed inside, coughing and gasping. The boarding house entryway was dim and smelled of linseed oil and old tobacco. Lily bent double, hands on her knees, trying to clear her lungs. Daniel straightened first, moving to secure the door against the wind, trying to rip it from his hands. Outside, the storm raged, a constant furious roar punctuated by the crack of breaking wood and the clang of metal.
Thank you.
Her voice came out hoarse. Daniel turned from the door, his face streaked with dust, his hazel eyes unreadable in the gloom.
They will wait out the storm and come back. We need to figure this out before they do.
Footsteps sounded from deeper in the house. A woman appeared, the boarding house keeper, her face pinched with worry. She said the storm had trapped at least a dozen people inside, and they should make themselves comfortable, because nobody would be going anywhere until it blew over. Lily nodded, still catching her breath. The keeper gestured toward the parlor where other storm refugees had gathered. As they moved into the crowded room, Lily caught sight of the 3 riders from the street, shaking dust from their coats near the front window. The scarred man's eyes locked onto her immediately. Trapped. They were all trapped together, and the truth had nowhere to hide. Daniel guided her to a corner spot near the cold fireplace, positioning himself between her and the riders. The parlor held perhaps 15 people, all dust-covered and anxious, their faces pale in the weak light filtering through the storm-darkened windows. The boarding house keeper moved among them, offering water from a pitcher. The wind hammered the walls with fists of sound. The scarred rider crossed the room with deliberate steps. He said there was no point delaying, and she should come peacefully.
She is not going anywhere with you.
Daniel's tone remained level, but something in his stance changed. A coiled readiness that made the scarred man pause.
You have a sketch and a name. That is not evidence.
The scarred man's lips curled. He said Crowley never made mistakes about his people, and if Daniel interfered, he would find himself on the wrong end of a rope too.
Crowley.
Daniel spoke the name like he was tasting something bitter.
Quentin Crowley?
The scarred man's eyes narrowed, but he confirmed it. Daniel glanced at Lily, his expression unreadable.
The cattle buyer.
You know him?
I know of him. He has been buying up failing ranches all spring, offering just enough to keep desperate men from going under entirely, then squeezing them for everything they are worth.
The scarred man spat toward the fireplace. He said Crowley was a respected businessman, and Daniel should watch his mouth. But another voice spoke up from across the room. An older man with iron gray hair. The man said he had sold his herd to Crowley last fall and got paid in marked bills that turned out to be counterfeit. And when he complained, Crowley's men made it clear his barn might burn if he pushed the matter. The room stirred uneasily. The younger rider with the nervous twitch looked uncomfortable. A woman near the window said her brother had worked for Crowley's outfit and disappeared last winter, and the county sheriff ruled it an accident, but never found the body. The scarred rider's hand moved to his gun. He said they should all mind their own business unless they wanted trouble. Daniel stepped forward slightly.
Seems like Crowley's business is everyone's trouble.
The scarred man's face darkened. He said Daniel should stay out of it unless he wanted to end up like the last man who crossed Crowley. The threat hung in the air. Lily's pulse hammered in her ears. She had come to Pine Hollow to escape her past, to build something of her own on land nobody else wanted. And now she was tangled in something far darker than a simple case of mistaken identity. She studied the scarred rider's face, the cold certainty there, the dead eyes that smiled while he delivered threats. A fence for stolen goods, she realized. That was what Crowley was. Buying failing ranches with bad money, squeezing the desperate, and using men like these three to keep everyone quiet. And she looked enough like this Clara Voss woman that Crowley could use her as a scapegoat, or leverage, or worse.
Why does Crowley want Clara Voss?
Her question cut through the tension. The scarred man's jaw tightened. He did not answer. The younger rider shifted his weight. The young rider said Crowley claimed she stole something from him, and he wanted it back.
What did she steal?
Silence. Then the older man with gray hair spoke again. He said he heard talk that Crowley kept records, a ledger showing every crooked deal, every payoff, every property stolen through fraud. And he kept it as insurance against his partners turning on him. If that ledger disappeared, Crowley would be desperate to get it back before someone took it to the territorial marshal. Lily felt the pieces shifting in her mind. A ledger. Evidence. That was what Clara Voss had taken. And that was why Crowley's men were hunting her with such single-minded focus. And if they dragged Lily back to Kansas believing she was Clara, she would disappear just like the woman's missing brother. Daniel seemed to reach the same conclusion. His hand moved subtly to rest on the butt of his sidearm. The boarding house keeper reappeared with a tray of tin cups. She announced in a shaky voice that she had coffee and everyone should sit down and be civilized until the storm passed. Nobody moved. The wind screamed outside. Then a new voice spoke from the doorway. A man stepped into the parlor from the back hallway, his appearance neat despite the storm, his voice soft as cottonwood silk. He wore a tailored coat and a pleasant smile that never reached his pale eyes. He said it seemed there was some confusion, and perhaps he could help clear things up. Lily went cold. Quentin Crowley, the villain himself, trapped in the same building. He must have taken shelter here when the storm hit, and now he stood between them and the only exit. Crowley's smile widened as his gaze settled on Lily. He said Miss Hayes, or should he say Miss Voss, had something that belonged to him and he would very much like it back.
I do not know what you are talking about. I have never seen you before in my life.
Crowley tilted his head, studying her with those dead eyes. He said she was a poor liar, but it did not matter because he had been patient long enough, and his men would search her homestead whether she cooperated or not.
You are not searching anything.
Daniel's voice cut like a blade.
And you are not laying a hand on her.
Crowley's attention shifted to Daniel, recognition dawning. He said, well, Daniel Blackwood, the trail boss. And was he not supposed to be in Abilene by now? Daniel's expression remained impassive.
Plans changed.
Crowley's smile took on a cruel edge. He said it was fortunate then, because he had been looking forward to meeting the man who thought he could testify against him about that little matter of the altered brands last spring. Lily glanced at Daniel sharply. He did not look at her.
I saw what I saw. Your men were running a rebranding operation, out of the canyon pens.
Crowley laughed softly. He said Daniel's word against his. And who would believe a Drifter Trail boss over a respected businessman? Besides, he had taken care of the witnesses. All of them. Daniel's jaw tightened. Crowley continued, saying it was remarkable, really, how things worked out. Because now he had Daniel Blackwood and the woman who stole his ledger both in one place. And the storm had given him all the time he needed to handle both problems permanently. The scarred rider and his companions moved to block the doorway. Crowley produced a small pistol from his coat pocket, holding it casually. He suggested everyone remain calm and seated, because there was no need for this to become messy, and once the storm passed, they would all leave quietly, and nobody else needed to get hurt. The other people in the parlor pressed back against the walls, eyes wide. The boarding house keeper made a small sound of distress. Lily's mind raced. She had no ledger. She had never met Clara Voss. But Crowley believed she had it, or he believed she could lead him to it, and either way, she and Daniel were dead the moment the storm ended. Unless. She looked at Daniel and found him already watching her. Something passed between them. An understanding born of desperation.
The ledger is at my homestead.
Her voice came out steady, despite the fear clawing at her throat.
Hidden in the barn. If you want it, you will have to let me take you there.
Crowley's eyes glittered. He said how convenient. And of course she would take him there. But first he needed some assurance that she would not try anything foolish. He gestured to the scarred rider. He ordered the man to secure Daniel Blackwood, because a hostage would ensure Miss Voss's cooperation. The scarred rider moved forward. Daniel's hand flashed to his gun, but the younger rider already had his weapon drawn and aimed. The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats. Then, Daniel slowly raised his hands.
Do not hurt her.
Crowley's smile was a graveyard thing. He said that depended entirely on whether she cooperated. The scarred rider pulled rope from his belt and bound Daniel's wrists. Lily watched, her chest tight, her mind screaming. There was no ledger. The moment Crowley discovered that, they were both finished. She needed time. She needed help. She needed a miracle. The storm howled its fury against the walls, and somewhere in the chaos of her fear, an idea began to form. Crowley gestured toward the door. He said once the storm lessened enough to ride, they would all take a trip to Miss Hayes's homestead, and she had better hope the ledger was exactly where she claimed. The wind outside reached a new pitch, a shrieking wail that made the window glass shudder. Dust seeped through every crack and crevice, coating surfaces with fine grit. The boarding house keeper huddled near the fireplace, her hands twisted in her apron. Lily forced herself to think. Her homestead was 3 miles out past Copper Creek, accessible only by a rough wagon track that would be nearly impassable in the storm. That gave her perhaps 2 hours, maybe 3 if the storm did not break. 2 hours to figure out how to keep herself and Daniel alive when Crowley discovered she had no ledger to give him. She looked at Daniel. His wrists were bound, but his eyes were sharp, watchful. He gave her the smallest nod, trusting her to have a plan even though they both knew she was making this up as she went. The older man with gray hair cleared his throat. He said Crowley would not get away with this, and people knew where they all were. Crowley laughed that soft, terrible laugh. He said storms were dangerous things, and tragic accidents happened all the time, and by the time anyone came looking, the story would be whatever he wanted it to be. He had the sheriff in his pocket, and half the county besides. The man subsided, his face pale. Crowley pulled out a pocket watch, checking it with a frown. He said the storm should blow itself out within a few hours, and then they would proceed. In the meantime, everyone should make themselves comfortable and not do anything stupid. The younger rider shifted uneasily. He muttered to the scarred man that this felt wrong. Taking hostages, threatening women. The scarred man told him to shut up. Crowley's cold gaze flicked to the young rider. He said if the boy had a problem, he was welcome to leave. But he should remember what happened to people who disappointed him. The young rider's face went rigid. He said nothing more. Lily watched the interplay, filing it away. The younger rider was nervous, uncertain, a weak link. But not weak enough to act. Not while Crowley held all the power. The storm hammered on. Minutes crawled past. The trapped townsfolk sat in miserable silence, afraid to move or speak. Daniel stood near the cold fireplace, his bound hands relaxed, his expression giving nothing away. Lily remained beside him, her mind churning through possibilities and discarding them just as fast. Then the boarding house keeper spoke up, her voice quavering. She said she had food in the kitchen and people needed to eat. Storm or no storm? Crowley considered this. He said the scarred riders should accompany her and ensure she did not try anything foolish like running for help. The keeper nodded and scurried toward the back hallway, the scarred rider following. That left Crowley, the younger rider, and the third man watching the room. Lily glanced at Daniel.
I need to use the necessary.
Crowley's eyes narrowed. He said she could wait.
I cannot wait. Unless you want me to embarrass myself and everyone else here.
It was a gamble. Crowley studied her for a long moment, then jerked his chin toward the back hallway. He told the third rider to take her and stay with her.
He cannot come into the outhouse with me.
Crowley's smile was ice. He said the rider would stand outside the door, and if she tried to run, he would shoot her in the leg and drag her back. And then he would shoot Daniel Blackwood in the stomach and let him die slowly.
I understand.
She did not look at Daniel as she followed the third rider toward the back of the house. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The man stayed close behind her, his hand on his gun. They passed through the kitchen, where the boarding house keeper was slicing bread with shaking hands, the scarred rider leaning against the counter watching her. Out the back door into the storm's edge. The wind tore at Lily's skirts and filled her mouth with grit. The outhouse was a small wooden structure 20 feet from the house, barely visible through the blowing dust. She stumbled toward it, the third rider right behind her. He shouted over the wind that she had 2 minutes. Lily pulled open the outhouse door and slipped inside, slamming it shut. The dim interior smelled of lime and old wood. She sagged against the wall, her legs trembling. 2 minutes. She had 2 minutes alone to think. The outhouse had a small window high on the back wall, too small for her to fit through but large enough to see out. She stood on the wooden seat and peered through the grimy glass. The storm raged beyond, turning the world into a brown void. But there, barely visible through the dust, she could make out the dark shapes of buildings. The back of the general store, the smithy, and beyond that, if she remembered the town layout correctly, the small clapboard church with its bell tower. The church where the new circuit preacher stored his belongings, including, she had heard, a packet of correspondence he was supposed to deliver to the territorial marshal in Kansas City. correspondence that included complaints about corruption and fraud in 3 counties. If she could get to that church, get that packet, she might have leverage. Proof that others were already moving against Crowley. Proof that his time was running out. But she was trapped in a boarding house with Crowley's guns on her and Daniel. And the moment the storm cleared, they would be dead. Unless she could turn Crowley's plan against him. Lily climbed down from the seat. Her 2 minutes were nearly up. She closed her eyes, forcing her breathing to steady, forcing her mind to work through the fear. Then she opened the outhouse door and stepped back into the storm. The 3rd rider grabbed her arm, hauling her back toward the house. Inside the kitchen, the boarding house keeper was arranging sliced bread on a tray, her hands still shaking. The scarred rider watched with bored malice. Lily let the 3rd rider push her through the kitchen toward the parlor. But as they passed the keeper, Lily stumbled, catching herself on the corner of the table.
I am sorry.
She straightened, steadying herself. The keeper nodded, nervously. Lily had managed to palm a small paring knife from the table edge and slide it into her shawl pocket. It was not much, but it was something. Back in the parlor, Crowley looked up from his pocket watch. He said she had taken long enough. Lily said nothing, moving back to stand near Daniel. Their eyes met. She shifted her weight slightly, letting him see the faint bulge in her pocket. His expression did not change, but she saw the understanding there. The storm continued its assault. The boarding house keeper brought the tray of bread and some cold meat, setting it on the side table. She said in a shaking voice that there was food if anyone wanted it. Nobody moved to eat. Crowley picked up a slice of bread, examining it as if checking for poison, then took a delicate bite. He said they should all try to relax, because it would be a long wait. Lily could not relax. Every nerve in her body screamed with tension. She watched Crowley, watched his hired men, watched the frightened townsfolk pressed against the walls. The older man with gray hair caught her eye. He looked like he wanted to say something, but was too afraid. The younger rider stood near the window, staring out at the storm, his face troubled. Lily made her decision.
Mr. Crowley.
Her voice cut through the tense silence. Crowley turned to her, eyebrows raised.
You are going to a lot of trouble for a ledger. What makes you think Clara Voss even brought it to Pine Hollow?
Crowley's smile was indulgent. He said, because he had people watching the stage lines and the wagon trails, and Clara Voss disappeared from Kansas 3 months ago, and the only place she could have gone that his people did not cover was east, toward Missouri, and Pine Hollow was the first town of any size in that direction. So unless she walked into the wilderness to die, she came here. And if she came here, she either still had the ledger, or she passed it to someone local. Either way, Miss Hayes was his best lead.
And if I am not Clara Voss? If I really am just a homesteader who looks like her?
Crowley shrugged. He said then she would die having done nothing wrong, and he would sleep just fine. Lily felt ice settle in her stomach. There was no reasoning with a man like this. No appealing to conscience or mercy. He would kill her and Daniel without hesitation, and move on to his next victim without a second thought. The only way out was through. She glanced at Daniel. He was watching Crowley with the same flat intensity he might watch a rattlesnake coiled in his path. Patient. Waiting. She turned her attention back to Crowley.
What is in the ledger that scares you so badly?
Crowley's pleasant expression flickered. He said it did not scare him. It was simply his property, and he wanted it back.
You have bought half the county with counterfeit money. You have run illegal branding operations. You have had people killed. That ledger is your death warrant if it reaches the territorial marshal.
The room went very still. Crowley's smile vanished. His pale eyes fixed on Lily with predatory focus. He said she seemed to know quite a lot for someone who claimed to be an innocent homesteader. Lily lifted her chin.
I know what everyone in this room knows. You are a thief and a killer. And you are terrified that ledger will prove it.
Crowley stood, the movement smooth and deliberate. He crossed the room until he was close enough that Lily could smell the pomade in his hair. He said softly that she was a brave little thing. But bravery would not save her, and he was done playing games. They would leave for her homestead as soon as the storm dropped enough to ride. And if the ledger was not there, he would put a bullet in Daniel Blackwood's head and make her watch before he killed her too.
Touch her, and you will die before you clear the room.
Daniel's voice was quiet, but absolute. Crowley laughed. He said Daniel was in no position to make threats. Daniel smiled, a cold, terrible expression.
I have been tied up by better men than yours, and I have gotten loose before.
Crowley's confidence wavered slightly. He glanced at the scarred rider. He ordered the man to check Blackwood's bonds. The scarred rider moved forward, reaching for Daniel's wrists. Daniel moved. His bound hands came up fast, the rope looping over the scarred rider's head, yanking him off balance. Daniel twisted, using the man's momentum to slam him into the wall. The room exploded into chaos. Crowley raised his pistol. Lily lunged, pulling the paring knife from her shawl. It was a tiny blade, meant for peeling apples, but she drove it toward Crowley's gun arm with all her strength. He twisted, the blade catching his sleeve and scoring across his forearm. He swore, backhanding her across the face. Lily stumbled, stars exploding in her vision. The younger rider had his gun drawn, but was not aiming at anyone, his face white with panic. The third rider aimed at Daniel. The older man with gray hair threw himself at the third rider's legs, knocking his aim wide. The shot went into the ceiling, plaster raining down. Daniel slammed the scarred rider's head against the doorframe and the man went limp. Daniel spun, his hand still bound, and kicked the third rider's knee. The man buckled with a scream. Crowley aimed at Daniel again. Lily threw herself at Crowley's arm, clawing at his wrist. The gun fired, the bullet punching through the window. Crowley grabbed her hair and threw her down. Daniel crossed the room in 2 strides and drove his boot into Crowley's ribs. Crowley went down gasping. The younger rider dropped his gun and raised his hands. He said he was done. He would not kill for Crowley anymore. The third rider was on the floor, clutching his knee and sobbing. The scarred rider was unconscious. Daniel stood over Crowley, breathing hard, his bound wrists still raised.
Where is the money you stole from the drovers?
Crowley spat blood. He said Daniel would hang and Lily would die screaming. Daniel kicked him in the ribs again, harder.
Where is the money?
Crowley gasped out that it was in the grain warehouse, hidden under the floorboards in the back room. Daniel looked at the older man with gray hair.
Get the sheriff. Tell him everything.
The older man nodded and ran out into the storm. Lily got to her feet, her cheek throbbing where Crowley had hit her. She pulled the rope from Daniel's wrists, her fingers shaking. Their eyes met.
You came back.
I told you. I would not let him hurt you.
She wanted to collapse into his arms, but there was no time. Crowley was still dangerous. Daniel hauled him up by his collar and shoved him into a chair. He told the boarding house keeper to bring more rope. The woman hurried forward with a coil of washing line. Daniel bound Crowley's wrists and ankles, pulling the knots tight enough to make Crowley hiss. The younger rider sat on the floor with his hands on his head, looking sick. The third rider was still sobbing. The scarred rider groaned and stirred. Daniel dragged him to another chair and tied him as well. Lily picked up Crowley's fallen pistol and held it steady, aimed at the floor but ready. Her hands had stopped shaking. The storm outside was easing, the wind dropping to a moan. Footsteps pounded on the porch. The sheriff burst in with 3 deputies and the older man with gray hair. The sheriff took in the scene, his face grim. He asked what had happened. Daniel told him. Crowley had been fencing stolen cattle and goods for years, skimming from every drive that came through Pine Hollow. When the last drive had come in short and the trail boss had started asking questions, Crowley had framed Daniel with the wanted poster and hired men to kill him. The evidence was in the grain warehouse under the floorboards. The sheriff looked at Crowley. He asked if it was true. Crowley said nothing, his dead eyes fixed on Daniel. The sheriff nodded to his deputies. He told them to take Crowley and his men to the jail, and then search the warehouse. The deputies hauled Crowley to his feet. As they dragged him toward the door, Crowley looked back at Lily. He said she would regret this, that he had friends who would finish what he started. Lily met his gaze without flinching.
Your friends will be in the cell next to yours.
Crowley smiled, that terrible empty smile. He said she did not know who she was dealing with. The deputies shoved him out into the fading storm. The younger rider was led out quietly. The third rider had to be carried. The scarred rider spat at Daniel's feet as he was dragged past. Daniel did not react. When the room was empty, except for the townsfolk and the boarding house keeper, the tension broke. The older man with gray hair clapped Daniel on the shoulder. He said Daniel had saved them all, that Crowley had been bleeding the town dry for years, and no one had been able to prove it. The boarding house keeper brought water and a cloth for Lily's face. Lily pressed it to her bruised cheek, wincing. Daniel took the cloth from her gently and dabbed at the swelling himself. His touch was careful, his expression hard.
He should not have touched you.
He will not touch anyone again.
Daniel's jaw tightened.
If he had hurt you worse, I would have killed him.
I know.
She reached up and covered his hand with hers. Their fingers tangled together, still trembling with adrenaline. The storm outside had passed, leaving the sky pale and washed clean. Sunlight broke through the clouds, slanting golden through the broken window. The boarding house keeper insisted they sit and eat. Lily realized she was starving. They sat at the table, surrounded by overturned chairs and scattered bread, and ate cold biscuits and ham while the townsfolk cleaned up around them. No one spoke much. There was too much to process. An hour later, the sheriff returned. He said they had found the money in the warehouse, along with bills of sale for stolen cattle, forged brands, and records going back 5 years. Crowley had been running a theft ring that stretched across 3 states. The stolen goods were worth thousands. The drovers who had been cheated would get their money back. Daniel's name was cleared. The wanted poster was a forgery. The real wanted man was dead, killed in a shootout in Kansas 2 years ago. Crowley had paid a printer to make a new poster with Daniel's face, and had spread it around to frame him. The sheriff apologized. He said he should have investigated harder, that he had let Crowley fool him. Daniel shook his head.
You were not the only one he fooled.
The sheriff looked at Lily. He asked if she was all right. Lily nodded.
I will be fine.
The sheriff said Crowley would hang for what he had done, that there was no question of it. He would send word to the federal marshal. Daniel thanked him. The sheriff left. The townsfolk drifted away, back to their homes and shops. The boarding house keeper offered them rooms for the night. On the house. Daniel accepted. Lily followed him upstairs, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. In the narrow hallway, Daniel stopped and turned to her.
You saved my life.
You saved mine first.
I would do it again.
So would I.
He reached out and touched her bruised cheek, so gently it made her throat ache.
I am sorry you were hurt. Because of me.
It was not because of you. It was because of Crowley. And he is finished.
Daniel's hand slid to her jaw, cradling her face.
When he grabbed you, I thought I would lose my mind.
But you did not. You stayed calm. You got us out.
I was not calm. I was terrified.
His voice was rough, raw. Lily leaned into his touch, her heart pounding.
I was terrified too. But I knew you would come.
I will always come.
The words hung between them, a promise. Lily's breath caught. She lifted her hand to his chest, feeling his heart beat fast and strong under her palm.
Danielle.
Lily.
He bent his head and kissed her. It was not gentle. It was fierce and desperate. The kiss of two people who had nearly died and were grabbing onto life with both hands. Lily kissed him back with everything she had, her fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him closer. His arms came around her, lifting her off her feet, holding her like he would never let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers.
I need to tell you something.
What?
I am in love with you.
Lily's heart stopped, and then started again, faster.
I am in love with you too.
I have nothing to offer you. I am a trail boss with no land, no house, just a horse and a bedroll.
I do not care.
You deserve better.
I want you.
Daniel closed his eyes, his arms tightening around her.
Are you sure?
I have never been more sure of anything.
He kissed her again, softer this time, tender and full of wonder. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright.
Then, I am the luckiest man alive.
We are both lucky. We are alive.
They stood in the hallway, holding each other, while the last light of the storm-washed day came through the window. Downstairs, the boarding house keeper was humming, sweeping up plaster. Outside, the town was waking up again, picking up after the storm. But Lily did not care about any of it. All she cared about was the man in her arms and the future they were going to build together. That night, they sat in the boarding house parlor with the other guests and told the whole story from the beginning. The townsfolk listened, rapt. Some had known Crowley was crooked, but had been too afraid to speak up. Others had been fooled completely. Everyone agreed that Daniel and Lily were heroes. The boarding house keeper brought out a bottle of whiskey and poured drinks for everyone. They toasted to justice, to courage, and to second chances. Lily sat beside Daniel on the sofa, his arm around her shoulders, and felt a peace she had not known in years. She had been running for so long, hiding, pretending to be someone she was not. Now, she could stop. She could be herself. And she could be with Daniel. The next morning, the federal marshal arrived. He took statements from everyone and confirmed that the wanted poster had been a fake. He apologized to Daniel and shook his hand. He said Daniel was free to go wherever he wanted, that there were no charges against him. Daniel thanked him. The marshal also said that the reward money for Crowley's capture would be split between Daniel and Lily. It was $500 each. Lily stared at him.
$500?
The marshal nodded. He said Crowley had been wanted for years, that the reward had been building. Lily looked at Daniel. Daniel looked back at her, his eyes warm.
That is enough to buy land.
Or start a ranch.
Or both.
The marshal smiled. He said they had earned it, and he wished them luck. After he left, Daniel and Lily walked down to the river. The water was high from the storm, rushing fast and cold. The town was behind them, bustling and alive. They stood on the riverbank, hands clasped, and looked out at the wide Missouri sky.
Where do you want to go?
Anywhere you are.
I was thinking we could stay near here, buy a piece of land, build a house. I could work as a foreman or start a small herd.
I could keep chickens, plant a garden, maybe take in sewing.
We could make a life.
We already have.
Daniel turned to her, his expression serious.
I want to marry you.
Lily's breath caught.
Yes.
You do not want to think about it?
I have thought about it. The answer is yes.
Daniel grinned, a sudden bright joy that transformed his face. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing. Lily laughed too, dizzy and deliriously happy. When he set her down, he kissed her, long and sweet. They stood on the riverbank for a long time, planning their future. They would buy land just outside Pine Hollow. Daniel would work the spring roundup to earn extra money. Lily would stay in town and save every penny. By summer, they would have enough to build a small house and buy a few head of cattle. It would be hard work, but they were not afraid of that. They had faced worse. They had faced Crowley and won. As the sun climbed higher, they walked back into town, hands still clasped. People called out to them, congratulating them, offering help. The general store owner said he would give them a discount on building supplies. The blacksmith offered to forge hinges and nails at cost. The boarding house keeper said Lily could stay free until the wedding. The town had adopted them. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent so long alone, hiding, afraid to let anyone close. Now she had a home, a community, and a man who loved her. Daniel squeezed her hand.
Are you all right?
I am more than all right. I am happy.
Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way.
That is a long time.
Not long enough.
They stopped in the middle of the street, oblivious to the people passing by, and kissed again. Someone whistled. Someone else cheered. Lily laughed against Daniel's mouth, her heart full to bursting. This was not the life she had imagined when she fled her old town, carrying a dead woman's name. But it was better. It was real. And it was hers. That night, they sat on the boarding house porch, watching the stars come out. The air was cool and sweet, washed clean by the storm. Daniel had his arm around Lily, and she leaned into him, perfectly content.
I never thought I would find this.
Find what?
Peace. Home. You.
I never thought I would either.
I am glad we were both wrong.
Lily smiled.
So am I.
They sat in silence, watching the night deepen. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. A dog barked in reply. The town settled into sleep, safe and quiet. Crowley was in a cell awaiting trial. His men were locked up beside him. The stolen money had been returned. Justice had been done. And two people who had been lost and alone had found each other. Daniel turned to Lily, his hazel eyes soft in the starlight.
I love you.
I love you too.
Always.
Always.
They kissed under the stars, sealing the promise. Tomorrow, they would start building their future. But tonight, they simply held each other, grateful to be alive, grateful to be together, and grateful for the second chance they had fought so hard to win. He was accused of murder until she proved his innocence in a dust storm showdown, Pine Hollow, Missouri, 1889. When a massive dust storm traps a town with a falsely accused trail boss and the homesteader who believes in him, a deadly confrontation with a vengeful cattle baron exposes years of corruption. Lily Hayes risks everything to clear Daniel Blackwood's name, and together they face hired guns, betrayal, and a fight for their lives. A gripping tale of courage, justice, and love forged in the heart of danger. Subscribe for more Wild West romance and action. Wild West romance, Western love story, cowboy romance, 1889 frontier, false accusation, dust storm, Missouri frontier, trail boss, homesteader, cattle baron villain, action romance, historical Western Pine Hollow, danger and courage, happy ending, Western justice, frontier survival, romantic suspense, West, earn showdown. What of the supposed to key, what spes, some past around her. In the stress to mentor whether or not your handfriend, or were there in this place where lost in whiles white, and towel lamp tired. Cone like granding it into Cowdenham. Clow fell my stunned, I call the crying the placador sposed. Colorized late 1800s American West photograph. Natural light, gentle contrast, slightly soft focus, subtle film grain, faint dust/scratches, slight vignetting, no text, no watermark. A chestnut-haired woman in her late 20s with bright green eyes, wearing a blue calico dress and cream knit shawl, clings to a dark-haired trail boss in his early 30s with intense hazel eyes, strong jaw, and weathered tan skin. Wearing a black wide-brimmed cowboy hat, brown leather duster, and dark trousers. She grips his arm protectively as he shields her with his body, both faces showing fierce determination and fear. Her shawl whipping in the wind, his hand on his holstered pistol. They stand in a narrow boarding house parlor during a dust storm showdown. Thick swirling dust obscuring the background through a broken window. Overturned furniture in the foreground. A fallen oil lamp and scattered papers in the midground. Shadowy figures of hired guns barely visible through the dust in time. The background. Wooden walls and a crooked picture frame. Storm light, casting dramatic shadows. Photorealistic cinematic style. Shot on cinema camera. Natural golden hour lighting. Shallow depth of field with soft bokeh background. Warm beige and amber color grading. Looks like a film still from a premium Western romance movie. Authentic 1800s period photography aesthetic. Professional portrait photog. Rafi quality.o/threw him down. Daniel drove his elbow into the scarred rider's ribs, broke free, and grabbed the man's fallen pistol. He spun, leveling it at Crowley.
Drop it.
Crowley froze, his gun still aimed at Lily. For a long moment, nobody moved. The storm howled outside. Then, the younger rider lowered his weapon. He said he was done. He was not going to die for Crowley's lies. Crowley's face twisted with rage. He called the boy a coward. The young man flinched, but held firm. He said Crowley had told them Blackwood was a murderer, but that wanted poster was a fake, and everyone knew it now. The third rider hesitated, then slowly lowered his gun as well. The scarred rider was slumped against the wall, gasping for breath. Crowley stood alone, his pistol still trained on Lily. He said if he was going down, he would take her with him. Daniel took one step forward.
You will not.
Crowley's hand shook. His smile was gone, replaced by something desperate and vicious. He said Daniel could not shoot him before he killed her. Daniel's aim never wavered.
Try me.
The sheriff pushed through the crowd, his own gun drawn. He told Crowley it was over. Crowley's eyes darted between Daniel, the sheriff, and Lily. Then his finger tightened on the trigger. Lily threw herself sideways. Daniel fired. Crowley's gun went off, the bullet smashing into the wall where Lily had been standing. Crowley staggered back, his pistol clattering to the floor. He clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. The sheriff moved in quickly, kicking Crowley's gun away and snapping cuffs on his wrists. The scarred rider tried to rise. The third hired gun raised his hands in surrender. The young rider was already backing toward the door. The sheriff barked orders, and two townsmen moved to secure the prisoners. Daniel dropped the pistol and crossed to Lily in 3 strides. She was on her knees, shaking. He pulled her up and into his arms.
Are you hurt?
No. I am fine. Are you?
I am fine.
She pressed her face against his chest, her fingers clutching his coat. He held her tightly, his hand cradling the back of her head. Around them, the room slowly came back to life. The boarding house keeper was crying with relief. The older man was helping the Reverend to his feet. The blacksmith was checking on his wife. The sheriff hauled Crowley upright. He said Crowley was under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, and attempted murder. Crowley spat blood. He said the sheriff had no proof. The sheriff smiled grimly. He said Lily Hayes had given him a ledger full of proof, and half the town had just witnessed attempted murder. Crowley's face went pale. The storm outside was beginning to ease. The wind still howled, but the worst of it had passed. Dust settled slowly, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. Daniel pulled back slightly, tilting Lily's face up. Her cheek was red where Crowley had struck her. Fury flashed through him again.
He hit you.
I have had worse.
That does not make it acceptable.
Daniel, we are alive. That is what matters.
He searched her eyes, She was right. They were alive. Crawley was in custody. The ledger would bring down the entire operation. The sheriff told his deputies to take the prisoners to the jail. He said he would need statements from everyone. Then he looked at Daniel. He said he owed Blackwood an apology. Daniel nodded slowly.
Accepted.
The sheriff extended his hand. Daniel shook it. The older man with gray hair approached, his face earnest. He said he was sorry for doubting Daniel. He had seen the poster and assumed the worst. Daniel told him it was understandable. The Reverend came forward as well, apologizing for his fear. One by one, the townspeople approached, offering apologies and thanks. Lily stayed close to Daniel's side, her hand in his. When the last of them had spoken, the boarding house keeper insisted they sit and have something to eat. She said they had been through hell and needed to recover. Lily glanced at Daniel.
I do not think I can eat.
Neither can I.
The keeper nodded, understanding. She said at least sit and rest while the storm finished passing. They sank onto the settee near the window. Outside, the dust was thinning, the sky lightening from black to gray. Daniel kept Lily's hand in his thumb, tracing slow circles on her palm. She leaned against his shoulder.
I thought he was going to kill you.
I thought he was going to kill you.
We are a pair. Are we not?
We are.
She lifted her head to look at him.
What happens now?
The sheriff will investigate. Crowley will stand trial. The ledger will bring down everyone involved.
And you?
I will stay until it is done. I owe the men who were hurt that much.
And after?
He hesitated. She held her breath.
After? I do not know. I have been a trail boss for 10 years. It is all I know. But after this, I am not sure I can go back to it.
What would you do instead?
I have thought about starting a small ranch. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could put down roots.
Her heart was pounding.
That sounds like a good life.
It does.
He looked at her, his gaze steady and intent.
I would need help running it. Someone who knows the land and is not afraid of hard work. Someone stubborn enough to keep me honest.
She smiled, tears pricking her eyes.
I might know someone like that.
Do you?
I do. She is difficult and independent to a fault, but she is loyal.
Loyal is good.
And she believes in second chances.
That is even better.
He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently.
Lily Hayes, I have known you less than a day, but I have never met anyone like you. You stood by me when no one else would. You risked your life to clear my name. I do not have much to offer, but if you will have me, I would like to try to build something with you.
Tears spilled down her cheeks.
Daniel Blackwood. I have spent 2 years alone, keeping everyone at arm's length because I was afraid of being hurt again. But you walked into that boarding house and looked at me like I mattered. Like I was worth believing in. I do not need much. I just need you.
He kissed her then, slow and deep, his hand cradling her face. She kissed him back, her fingers tangling in his hair, knocking his hat to the floor. Around them, the boarding house was slowly returning to order. The keeper was sweeping up broken glass. The blacksmith was righting overturned furniture. But Daniel and Lily were lost in each other. The storm forgotten, the danger passed. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Daniel rested his forehead against hers.
I meant every word.
So did I.
I will need to stay in Pine Hollow for a few weeks. The trial. Statements. Making sure justice is served.
I will be here.
And after?
After, we start building.
He smiled, and it transformed his face.
Together.
Together.
The storm had passed. Outside the window, the sky was clearing, revealing patches of blue. The dust was settling, coating the street in a fine layer of grit. But the air was clean, and the sun was breaking through. 2 days later, Daniel stood in the sheriff's office, reviewing the last of his statement. The investigation had moved quickly. Crowley's ledger had been even more damning than Lily had realized. It detailed years of extortion, theft, and intimidation. 3 other ranchers had come forward with similar stories. The hired guns had turned on Crowley, offering testimony in exchange for lighter sentences. Crowley himself had been silent, his dead-eyed stare fixed on nothing. The sheriff closed the ledger and looked at Daniel. He said the circuit judge would arrive in 2 weeks. The trial would be swift. Crowley would hang. Daniel nodded. He said that was justice. The sheriff agreed. Then, he pulled out the wanted poster. The one that had started everything. He said he had sent a telegram to the marshal in Kansas. The man in the poster was a rustler named Jack Hollis. He had been caught and hanged 3 months ago. The resemblance to Daniel was uncanny. But it was coincidence, nothing more. The posters were being pulled. Daniel's name was cleared. Daniel took the poster, staring at the face that looked so much like his own.
3 months.
The sheriff nodded. He said Crowley must have seen the poster and realized he could use it to frame Daniel, to stop him from interfering with his operations. It had almost worked. Daniel folded the poster and handed it back.
Almost.
The sheriff smiled. He said Daniel had Lily Hayes to thank for that. Daniel smiled as well.
I know.
He left the sheriff's office and walked down the main street. Pine Hollow was busy, the town recovering from the storm. Shopkeepers swept dust from their porches. Wagons rolled past, their wheels crunching on grit. Children played in the street, their laughter bright in the afternoon sun. Daniel found Lily at the general store, purchasing supplies. She looked up as he entered, her face lighting up.
How did it go?
It is done. My name is cleared. The trial is in 2 weeks.
And after that?
After that, we start looking for land.
She set down the bag of flour she had been examining and crossed to him.
I have been thinking about that.
And?
There is a property about 10 miles west of here. 160 acres. Good water. Decent grazing. The owner died last year and his son wants to sell.
How do you know all this?
I asked around.
Daniel laughed, shaking his head.
You never stop, do you?
Not when it matters.
He pulled her close, right there in the general store, not caring who saw.
Then let's go look at it. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
That evening, they walked to the riverbank at the edge of town. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. The river ran smooth and quiet, reflecting the light. Behind them, Pine Hollow settled into evening, smoke rising from chimneys, lamps being lit in windows. Daniel turned to face Lily, taking both her hands in his.
I need to say something. When I came to Pine Hollow, I was just passing through. Another town, another drive. I did not expect to stay. I did not expect to find anything worth staying for.
Lily's eyes were bright, her hands tightening on his.
But you believed me when no one else did. You risked everything to help me. You are braver than anyone I have ever known. And I do not want to go anywhere without you.
Then don't.
She stepped closer, her voice steady and sure.
I was running when I came here. Running from a life that did not fit, from expectations I could not meet. I thought I would be alone. I thought that was what I wanted. But I was wrong. I want this. I want you. I want a life we build together.
A ranch. A home.
A family. Someday.
Someday. Soon.
He kissed her then, slow and deep, the river running beside them, and the town at their backs. When they finally pulled apart, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Lily rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart.
Do you think the land is good?
I think anything we do together will be good.
That is not an answer.
It is the only answer that matters.
She laughed, the sound light and free. They stood together at the riverbank, watching the last light fade from the sky. Behind them, Pine Hollow glowed with warm lamplight. Ahead of them, the open land stretched west, full of promise. And between them, there was only truth, spoken out loud at last, and the quiet certainty of a future they would face together.